All the action packed in 180 minutes. Power Breakfast with Tessa Dooms. Weekdays 6 to 9 a.m.
The time is 8:11, and as we've been chatting throughout the morning, June is Men's Mental Health Month. Internationally recognized Men's Mental Health Awareness, in fact. And we wanted to have a conversation about that in a variety of different ways. Firstly, just to point out the difficulties that patriarchy brings on to men as well as women. And so this morning I gave you a number of different statistics about the ways in which men's lives are complicated by the kind of societal pressures that are out there. But of course, one of those is the high rates of suicide, etc. And we also know that young men particularly have got a disproportionately high use of alcohol, of drugs, so many different things that are part of this conversation. So I thought it was important for us to dedicate some time to it. In studio with me is a friend of mine, actually, Mervin Canham, who is somebody who's worked really closely and very intentionally on men's issues. He's the founder of Holding Space Circles, which works with men to create spaces for men to talk, to engage, and to deal with some of the issues that have been stigmatized historically for men. So, Mervin, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Really great to have you in studio.
Thank you for the invite.
So give us a little bit about your history and what brings you to working in men's spaces in a time where a lot of gendered work is about women. How did you end up working in men's health and wellness?
So I guess I'll give you the short story, not the long story. I lost a brother through suicide 23 years ago, and I guess for me, I always looked for brotherhood and I guess a safe space to be as a man, and where do I belong? And I guess a lot of it was around belonging and connection with men in particular. And I guess where I grew up, feelings wasn't really something that was spoken about. It was just glanced over. And and then I joined a movement called the Mankind Project in 2006. And I found brotherhood there. I found connection. I found a beautiful space there where I could just be myself in an authentic way without masks. And then we went on. So in 2000, 2 years ago, basically, I was like, okay, well, how do I create spaces where men can be themselves? And then I reached out to a guy called Justice Mukele, and his artwork spoke about toxic masculinity. And then we met back and forth, and we decided, well, let's start. Yeah. And for me, my work has always been in therapy, working in treatment centers with alcoholics and drug addicts, and also working with men in particular for such a long time, and being in a psychiatric hospital as well. So on a dual diagnosis program that I used to work at a Kiso clinic in Parktown. So it was like, okay, how do I make this
bridge
public?
Those two worlds. And so what does the spaces look like that you hold? Who comes to them? Because a lot of men will say, no, that's for a particular kind of man. It's not for me. So what do the spaces look like that you hold?
Well, when we launched, we had 50 men.
Yeah.
And we had black men. Most men were black men. And what's happened is, I guess through location and where we're based in Craighall, it's a lot of middle-class black men and white men that come to the space, but majority black men come to the space. And a lot of men, like I was saying last week, a lot of men get referred by their wives that send them to the space as well. But also men come when they're in crisis as well. Do you know what I mean? So,
and this is for dialogue, for engagement,
and
for advice. It's not a complex
No,
thing.
it's just, the space is just, we're there, we sit in a circle, we check in with our feelings, and we just have the ground rules. And the ground rules are, okay, where you at, what's been your high for the week, what's been your low, and let's just speak honestly. No one's there to give you advice. You speak for yourself, you use I statements. And if you want advice, we'll set up a process that will assist you to get advice. But yeah, we're there to just support you and listen to you, and also for a space for you where you can just vomit and be authentic without, I think sometimes as men, when we meet, we kind of have this thing where we put our car keys on the table, and that kind of, it's this thing of,
bravado.
That bravado. And we try, we're dismantling that of like, okay, just come in your fullness, in your nakedness, in your truth.
And you mentioned mental health and your background in mental health. We also joined with by Anele Siswana on the line, who's a clinical psychologist, because a lot of this is about health and mental health therapy, but not necessarily always in the most traditional senses. We need to find broader expressions of how we create mental health and well-being. Anele, thank you for joining us this morning. And what is your sense about what is needed for us to build healthy masculinities from a clinical perspective?
Good morning to you and the listeners, and to my brother Vance. So I suppose for me, we are starting to do work that really emphasizes the importance of holistic care. I am part of a very big movement around Dove Men Plus Care, which suggests the idea of holistic care with very influential key male figures such as Oxenshare and Obosi and many others that are really making the idea of holistic care more palatable to men, and that we just don't focus only on grooming, but rather we focus more on the idea of what it means to be whole and to heal. And so with the kind of work that I do around healing masculinities, I am for the idea that suggests that let's look at giving men the adequate language that makes it easy to understand their relationship with their emotions, their relationship with their tears. I mean, we come from a tradition that suggests the idea of us being strong, us being macho, and all of these ideas. And the idea of positive masculinity then suggests that we human, before we are men,
Absolutely.
we have a human experience that then allows us to just be. And so the work is already done. I mean, last week there was also another beautiful gentlemen's club event that was organized by Amanda Damoz and many others, that her team. But it also suggests this idea that men are intentional about understanding their wounding and understanding their reality, but also creating a movement that says, let's not die in silence.
Absolutely.
Over the weekend also, through a relative, I found out another suicide-related case of a young man that unfortunately didn't make it. He jumped over and then his life was over. So we are doing the work to make sure that the stats go down, but it's not an easy work because all of these ideas around manhood, being a man, are deeply entrenched in societal, social constructions that make it very difficult for men to come out, especially when men are on the other end of spectrum in society that don't have money, they don't have power, they don't have access. And so you get to realize that anxiety, depression, substance abuse become key because men are really struggling.
Yeah, and Mervin, I want to bring you back in here because really part of the conundrum around manhood is that men are portrayed and masculinity is portrayed as power. But when you are in an environment where men are disempowered actively by systems, disempowered through unemployment, disempowered through poverty, disempowered through racism, then you find men looking for power through other sources. How are men articulating that crisis of having to try and live up to the ideal of being powerful in such a disempowered context?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where we turn to drugs, we turn to alcohol, and that's where we leak onto women as men. Yeah. And we impact women in those ways where we want power, right? And particularly, I'm using the word we because it's a collect. We men, and I don't want to say, those are those them. It's us. We the problem. We raping, we killing, and I think. When we're not doing our work, we're leaking onto the kids, we're leaking onto women. And particularly, I think that, and that's why, the space was created for us just to, speak our truth, speak about our flaws, speak about our insecurities as men, and not leak onto others and impact women. I mean, that's just in plain English.
Or even other men. I mean, I was reading the murder stats for men being 87% of murders are male, but they also by male perpetrators, and that's also the other part of this. But Nele, from your perspective, you were talking about this holistic approach to this. And so, men I've found many men are very averse to the idea of the one-on-one therapy model, all of that. And I think the kind of work that both you and Mervin are doing is about collectivizing this, making it a collective effort. Why is it so important to move from the kind of the normative, clinical, one-on-one approach to a more collective one, Anele?
I'm conservative in this idea around the one-on-one therapy because it allows space to unpack and to make sense. How come ever I become this person, and how come these emotions fit in this manner? So, and I understand people talk about therapy being an expensive exercise, it being a Western Eurocentric construct. I mean, there are some of us who are relatable, who are males, and many other social constructs that we come with that make this idea of therapy more palatable. At the same time, I suppose there is value for group spaces that we have, and campaigns, and these much more broader interventions, because they make it easy for the message to land. But my worry is it's always the kind of men in the township, the kind of men in the rural areas that it seems we're speaking to the converted amongst each other. We've got the language, we've got the tools, but are we really doing much?
Sure.
My greatest dream is to really create programs for young boys and rural men in the townships, in Alex, in Wamashu, in Kwazakele, where we make these programs and campaigns directed to them, because that's where the crime is happening, that's where the killings are happening.
Sure.
Obviously, even with us, who somewhat have middle-class status or access to privilege, gender-based violence plays out differently there.
Absolutely.
Because there's power there. The power that we're talking about is much more complex and sophisticated, whereas in the realities of poverty, realities of disposition, when you are pushed in that context, I wonder what then happens to your psyche.
Yeah.
And so if we are doing work that's then going to speak to group work, to engagements, community endeavors. I was in the Eastern Cape last week with a group of men. It was so beautiful to talk mental health using
in that
our
context,
own language.
Absolutely, language as well.
Language as well. So we can assume that when we talk mental health is understood from a construct that makes it everyone understand it.
Sure.
So in our interventions, that we need to make more interventions that are grassroots based, so that we have the language that lends when we talk to this kind of men.
Sure. Zweli from Tshwane, you want to weigh in on this as well, and then I'll come back to Mervin.
Yeah, good morning, Tessa. So sometimes we find some societal pressure, like religiously wise. You are told in the Bible that men should provide, men should be a head of the family. And if you are unable to provide financially, you become so discouraged. You question your manhood, that I'm no longer a man. But dialogue and talking, it's also help. As men, we do talk. Maybe I can make an example of in parks where men are gathering, whether it's hiking. You must go where men are and
Absolutely.
talk. You might find out that it's not you alone who's coming across that particular problem.
100%.
When you start to talk, some other men will tell you that it's not you alone, and we've navigated this problem by doing 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much, Really Francoine, from just emphasizing that point. And Mervin, I'll end off with you here because viewers won't know this, but you and I grew up in Klipstroit West together. So we grew up in that township environment. And so when you say the environment you come from was not one where we spoke about emotions, it was under-resourced, it was marginalized. We were in that context. And so how do you intend to take the work that you're now doing in a Craig Hall back to a Klipstroit?
So that was always the intention, and the intention is that we start an MPC. So the point is that we go and we have holding space circles within the townships. So the point of holding space is that there's no hierarchy in that space around facilitation. So we've got a foundation course that kind of gives you the foundation of who you are as a man. And then we've got a facilitators course. And what that looks like is then you go out and you create a circle within your township.
Sure.
And we go there and we help you set that up.
Got you.
Do you know what I mean?
So you want to start a movement of circles.
Exactly. And there's circles all over the world. And there's circles in Khayelitsha, there's circles in El Dorado Park. But also, it comes back to like breaking that isolation of loneliness that, I think as men, I know for me, sometimes I think I'm the only one going through certain problems in my life. You know what I mean? But holding space is more about like just men sharing and being in a space where I can be like, oh, I'm not the only one. I can relate to this man. Do you know what I mean? And I guess that's what it's about. And
so we can find both. So Anele Siswana, we can find your work, and also Mervin, the holding space has got a lot of social media space as well, where people can connect with you on your work on Instagram. I think it is.
Yeah, it is Instagram.
Yeah. So that's just holding space.
Holding space circles.
Holding space circles for men. And Anele, how can people get in touch with your work?
On Instagram as well, on Anele_Siswana, well as bookings at anelesiswana.co.za, as well as 072-048-6361. But on my Instagram, Anele_, that's where people can DM me and we'll take it from there.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Thank you so much, both Anele and Mervin, for sharing your work and investing in this very crucial part of building our society.